Okay, so when you brake, you hear squeaking. Light brake, hard brake, you've got squeaking on the front or the rear. This process is the same for really any motorcycle or any vehicle. On the 2021, this is it. Well, this is the Ducati 1260S. I did mention it to the dealership. You know, when I bought my Ducati V4S, it was squeaking as well on both the front and the rear, and it was just really annoying. Every stop sign, every stoplight, you pull up and it would squeak. It just always squeaking. The dealership told me, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Like you just have to, you have to work those brakes real good when you buy a new bike, and you got to brake them in, and then they'll stop squeaking, right?" Well, they never stopped squeaking. I worked them in pretty hard and pretty good, and they continued to squeak. So that process didn't work for me, although it is worth giving it a shot to see if it'll work for you. Get up to speed and then brake real hard, launch on the front and the rear, and see what happens. So what do you need to use? Disc brake quiet. This turns into kind of a rubbery, kind of sticky compound. And what you do is you apply this to the back side of your brake pad, only in the area where it comes in contact with the caliper piston, okay? So the piston, it usually has a circular head that's hollow in the middle, and it pushes against the pad. And so what you'll do is you'll put a nice little circle of this stuff so that when that little caliper piston pushes on the pad, it's actually pushing and contacting with this. That creates a nice barrier between the caliper and the backside of your pad. If you have shims, this is a great stuff as well. It keeps the pad or the shim from vibrating or just moving ever so slightly. And it's that slight movement, but at a very high frequency, that creates the audible noise, right? The squeal or the squeak. You also have here synthetic caliper grease. And you can see on the bottle in this diagram exactly where you want to put that grease. It says, hey, put it on the back side of your pads. Put it on your pins. Put it on any moving part, okay? Any moving part, including certain areas on the caliper. You see those arrows pointing to the caliper, right? This is a smaller tube. You don't need if you don't need a huge bottle. I bought a huge bottle because I use it on my cars, and cars require typically a lot of grease. You can use this little bottle, buy this little one of synthetic caliper grease, okay? It's made by Versachem, okay? Versachem. So let's take a look at the Diavolo. Okay. So here you have this spring clip, okay? This is a flat spring clip. And this spring clip, to remove this spring clip, it just pulls straight up, okay? It comes straight up and out. And it comes into contact with the pads. Keeps those pads kind of in place a little bit and keeps them from vibrating. It reduces movement on the pads. So anywhere that this spring comes in contact with the caliper or the pads, that's where you want to apply grease. And then the pads themselves, right, they're in there. Let me grab my flashlight real quick so I can just show you kind of the backside of those pads. Let's see if we can actually get this thing to work. It's kind of temperamental. All right. So you can see there the piston on the far left, okay, that round circular thing, and where it comes into contact with the backside of the brake pad. So on this bike, I actually did use a little bit of the disc quiet, the brake disc quiet, which is that rubbery stuff that you put on. You let that sit for about 15 minutes till it solidifies and becomes kind of it turns into a rubber almost, a sticky rubber. But that works really, really well. And then, let me see. Here's a good spot. So you see right down there, the copper backside, it's kind of a copper color of the disc, or the pad itself. There's a little lip at the bottom of the caliper where that pad sits, and it rides kind of in and out on that lip. So down there, that lip is also another area where you want to put some caliper grease. Okay, on this particular piston or caliper, you have two pistons. You've got, you know, this top piston right here, and then this lower piston. So you have two circular pistons. So you want to make sure that you get good coverage on the backside of that pad. You know, so that's pretty much, you know, how you stop the, you know, these pads from vibrating, or these parts from vibrating and creating that really loud squeal. You know, to do this job, it's really easy. You know, you'll remove these two guys right here, slide the caliper off, and you just kind of hang the caliper, you know, hang it so it doesn't, you know, damage your rim or anything like that, and then you can work on it very, very easily. I was able to grease and lube up everything in probably under an hour for sure, from start to finish, including like getting all the tools out, doing the job, letting it sit, putting everything away. The rear is is a little excuse me. It's just a little trickier, but it's also fairly easy. You can see that there's a cotter pin right here. Okay, there's that cotter pin, and you grab that with a pair of needle nose pliers and you pull it out, and then you can put right here like a little tap on the backside of this pin right here, like a nail punch or something, and then you just tap the pin out. It comes out through the other side, I think. Actually, yeah, it comes out through the other side. So you can pull that pin out, and then you can remove the pads, okay? Pretty straightforward, not too difficult. I don't even think I removed the caliper from the rear. I think I just pulled out the pin and then pulled the pads out and then worked them up and put them back in, but it is easier if you do remove that caliper. The torque spec on these, I believe, is 45 Newton meters. And the procedure for these guys is essentially you pull them out, clean them up, and then the threads themselves, the threads that actually go into here, you want to lube those threads up with some synthetic caliper grease. I mean, not like an insane amount, but a decent amount to keep the threads lubed. And then on the back side of the head here, on the underside of this head or on the flat surface that the head sits against, you want to lube that up as well. And then what you do is you hand tighten these down, both of them, hand tighten. And then you grab your brake, the brake lever up top, and you squeeze the brake lever 2 times, okay? And then after you squeeze it 2 times, then you hold it down, squeezed on the 3rd time. And while you're holding the brake lever down, you torque this and you torque this to 45 Newton meters. That is the procedure for properly tightening those calipers, okay? The grease essentially helps to ensure that you get, that it tightens up properly inside this chamber here without hanging up at all, and that it's able to tighten down to a good torque spec, because it has the bolt has essentially free movement. But you don't need to you don't need to put Loctite on these things or anything like that. Like that's the shop manual spec for how to do that, okay? So just keep that in mind. You might think, whoa, it's crazy, put grease on a bolt, but yeah, actually most of the bolts on this bike, when it comes to things like that, the shop manual says, hey, grease the threads and grease the backside of the head. And you'll find that to be very, very common on a lot of bolts for this bike.